Hello everybody, it's Cam, and in this video we're going to talk about the bow, what cards work with it, what cards don't work with it, and we'll even get into what cleaners are best to use when you want to go with a bow build. So let's start off by talking about cards that don't work with the bow. There has been a lot of confusion around this, but luckily for the most part you can actually figure out which cards work with the bow just by reading them. That's not the case all the time, but for now let's talk about Patient Hunter and other cards like this. Patient Hunter is a card that is going to give you increased damage whenever you're aiming down sights for a little bit, but if you actually read the card, it says increases your bullet damage. And the important thing to note is that the bow's arrows do not count as bullets. So any card that talks about bullet damage is not going to work, such as Patient Hunter, Power Swap, Silver Bullets, Large Caliber Rounds, Combat Training, and Ammo Pouch. This does suck because that's a lot of good damage cards that you can't even use with the bow. Still keeping in mind that the arrows don't count as bullets, we can't technically use Shredder. The bow does get increased damage whenever someone else puts the stacks of Shredder on something, but you do need to be shooting these specials with bullets in order to create the stacks in the first place, so the bow just won't put stacks on anything. Next we have Highwayman. Sadly this card won't work with the bow, and that's because when you read it, it says kills with a secondary gun. The bow does not count as a gun. Keeping in mind that the bow is not a gun, this also means trigger control won't work, because it says precision kills with guns grant 0.5% accuracy. So you can use your primary weapons to get stacks of trigger control and then switch to your bow with that increased accuracy, but when you're getting precision kills with your bow, you will not be getting trigger control stacks. Getting into a couple of cards that you would have to try to know they don't work, we have Run and Gun and Face Your Fears. Even if you have Run and Gun in your deck, you will not be able to sprint around while shooting your bow. And I was pretty surprised to find out that Face Your Fears does not give you temporary health when you kill things with a bow. Nothing in the card would even hint to this, so I'm assuming this is actually a bug that will eventually be fixed. Getting towards the bottom of the list, I have some reload speed cards in here. That's because reload speed does not affect how fast you can shoot the bow, sadly. And I also had a question of whether the ADS is disabled whenever you take cards such as Mag Coupler. And yes, the ADS is disabled like with every other gun. Headband Magnifier also doesn't work to improve your firing speed. There were some people theorizing that this might improve the speed you can shoot the bow, but no, nothing changes how fast the bow shoots, as far as I know. I also had some people questioning whether melee stamina efficiency would affect the efficiency of you firing the bow, and no it doesn't, it is exactly the same. Alright, that's pretty much it for the cards that you might expect to work with the bow that don't actually work with the bow. So now let's talk about cards that do work with the bow. Like I said before, any bullet damage card won't work, but cards that have to do with just general damage will work, such as Mark for Death, Experimental Stimulants, Glass Cannon, Overprotective, Belligerent, and Confident Killer. And speaking of increasing your general damage, Walker's passive also works with the bow because it is an increase of 10% general damage. Moving on, cards that increase your move speed while firing will also work with the bow, like Energy Drink and Hellfire. Even Pep in your step will work with Precision Kills. Precision Kills can also give you 5% increased weak spot damage with Sadistic. And speaking of weak spot damage, all cards that increase your weak spot damage will also work with arrows. So that means Reckless Strategy, Hyper Focus, Knowledge is Power, Tunnel Vision. Any card that has to do with weak spot damage will work. Another Precision Kill base card, Broadside, will activate when getting headshots. And surprisingly, Fill 'em Full of Lead will activate while shooting the bow. However, the bow only shoots fast enough to get between 7 to 9 stacks of Fill 'em Full of Lead. It does increase your damage, it doesn't increase your fire rate though. Lastly, Adrenaline Fuel does give you stamina back whenever you get kills, which is actually a pretty decent card to take with a bow since the bow uses stamina as ammo, kind of. Now that we're done talking about the cards, let's talk about the bow a little bit. Like I said, the bow takes away stamina every time you shoot it, but something important to know is that even after you're out of stamina, you can keep shooting the bow, it will do the same amount of damage, and it will have the same fire rate. The only issue is that your accuracy will be a lot lower, but if you take a bunch of accuracy cards, this won't matter as much. You can even do charge shots when you're out of stamina. The bow doesn't care. One hidden feature of the bow is that it basically has a suppressor built into it. This means it will do increased damage to unaware enemies. and the bow is almost completely silent, so you can fire it while you're pretty close to birds, and you can take out a bunch of ridden without them ever noticing you are there. Alright, before we get into the deck I've made, let's talk about the cleaners you should be using. I've already mentioned that Walker is a good choice because the 10% damage does increase how much you're doing with the arrows. Evangelo is another good choice because he gets increased stamina regen. The only cleaner I'd say you should never take if you want to go with a bow build is Jim. His 10% team weak spot damage does work. His stacking 2.5 damage increase does not work. You can get the stacks whenever you get precision kills with arrows, but it's not going to increase the damage of the arrows. Alright, here's the deck I've made. The first 6 cards are all about doing extra damage. We have weak spot damage in there along with general damage. I think Knowledge's Power is a nice card to have as well, since hit markers don't always show up when using the bow. And just having the numbers showing up letting you know you're hitting your shots is pretty nice. I put Ridden Slayer in here rather than Reckless Strategy because we're already taking Glass Cannon and I'm just not a fan of taking negative damage resistance cards, but if you want to switch this out for Reckless Strategy, go ahead. I definitely don't recommend Hyper Focus because I think movement speed is pretty important when using the bow, which brings us to Hellfire. Hellfire is going to give us movement speed while firing, and when you're using the bow, you'll be shooting a lot since there's infinite ammo and you can fire forever. So Hellfire mixed with Run Like Hell and Marathon Runner is going to allow us to keep firing while backing up if a special is coming towards us. Next, I put Natural Sprinter into the deck because, like I said before, the bow will do the same amount of damage whether you're out of stamina or if your bar is full, so it doesn't really matter if we run out of stamina. I think it's way more important that our stamina regenerates faster after we're done using the bow. If you're not a fan of the negative 50% maximum stamina, Energy Bar is also a good choice. The next 2 cards work well with Natural Sprinter because they are going to give us enough accuracy that even when we're out of stamina, we will be almost 100% accurate while crouching. This will make it a lot better once you're out of stamina to just keep on firing. Next, we have Copper Scavenger and Money Grubbers, which in my opinion are still the 2 best copper cards. And then lastly, I'm taking Stealthy Passage. The reason I'm taking Stealthy Passage is because when you're using a bow, you have to adapt a stealthy playstyle. That's what the bow is all about. You'll be able to fire while very close to the birds, and they will not get scared, making it a lot easier to clear out the area before you pop the birds and earn your team some extra copper. So what do you guys think of the bow? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe to see the next video or live stream we have on this channel. But until then, have a good one, everybody.